The door to the bar opened up, letting sunlight shine into the otherwise dark space, and Heath walked in with a smile on his face. James, the bartender, looked up from his magazine, greeting his old friend with a smile while grabbing a glass to pour the man's regular drink. He knew that look. Heath had just completed a job, and he was celebrating the fact that he had made it through another day. Heath sauntered up to the bar and sat down at his usual stool along the rounded end of the counter, 5 steps from the jukebox and 10 from the bathroom. The establishment rarely had any visitors aside from a few regulars, and this day was no exception. One other patron was drinking today at a table in the back corner, and the only sound was that of a ceiling fan rotating above what used to be a dance floor. James filled a glass from one of the taps and slid it over to Heath. James had taken part in his share of adventure when he was younger, somehow surviving into his 50s before pouring his life savings into the bar he now spent almost all of his time in. It wasn't much to look at. The tile on the floor was peeling up in several places, and the wood paneling on the walls had seen better days among the plethora of other issues. But it was the one thing in the world he could say was his. He liked to tell the story to new patrons about the time that John F. Kennedy himself wandered in for a drink after a campaign event in nearby Mansfield during his presidential run in 1960. No one believed this, of course, but there was a stool near the middle of the counter with a plaque that claimed Kennedy sat here. Unsubstantiated claims of presidential candidates stopping by aside, the bar did have its share of history. In the 1920s, it was the place to be in the small town of Mount Vernon, with small-name celebrities from local plays drinking away their dreams of making it big on Broadway, and local music acts playing live nightly. The sale of alcohol was illegal back then, so measures had to be taken to hide the good stuff when the inevitable inspections would come up. When the Depression hit, the bar would become a makeshift food bank, helping locals get through the roughest times anyone had ever known. The Second Great War would see the bar regain its place as a beacon for those wishing to drink their cares away, with many having their final drink before shipping off and never making it back. Then, in 1946, the bar would be purchased by James Raven. James spent his youth longing for adventure, wanting to see the world and learn as much as he could about history and the different cultures. In 1917, he would see his wish fulfilled, in a way, when the United States entered the Great War and he joined the Navy. After 2 years, however, he would wind up having his left knee shattered by an unsecured anchor, and he would be unceremoniously discharged from the military. Still longing to see the world, James would join a company that had sent expeditions all around the globe in search of artifacts for research and cataloging. On one of these expeditions in 1927, James would meet Margaret, the woman who would become his wife just 2 years later. Their marriage would be happy, although short-lived, as Margaret would fall ill and pass away in 1934. After losing the love of his life, James would spend the next couple of years volunteering for the most dangerous expeditions he could find, hoping each one would be his last. One trip to a dense jungle in Brazil would have finished him off if it hadn't been for the intervention of a naive young man by the name of Heath Borjears. Heath would become an apprentice of sorts to James, giving him a reason to keep on living. The young man needed some direction in his life as he had been drifting from place to place since he had lost his parents at only 13 years old, and James began to see Heath as a surrogate son. Things were going well until James took a bullet to the chest that missed his heart by mere inches, forcing him to slow down a bit and take a long, hard look in the mirror and reconsider his career choice. After discussing it with Heath, he decided the best thing to do would be to settle down and buy a bar. Moving back to his hometown, he found an old, run-down building that kind of reminded him of himself, and within a few months, he had built up a new local watering hole. Heath would continue hunting for artifacts, though he would stick to more local jobs. After a while, he became known as the man who can find anything, and clients would seek him out for the most difficult endeavors. Most of these jobs would be turned down due to travel requirements, but occasionally one would come around to pique Heath's interest and he would go a little further away. After each job, Heath would return to the bar to regale James with the story and wind down. The routine had become common for both men, and it brought a certain comfort and peace to their world. After a few sips in silence, Heath got up and walked over to the old jukebox. All of the music was out of date at this point, and none of it had ever really been popular, but that didn't stop him from dropping a dime and selecting his favorite track. As the song started playing, he walked back over and sat down, relaying the story of how he recovered the lucky limbs to James. Just as Heath was finishing the tale, the sound of the door opening startled both men. Their eyes darted over to see a dark figure walking in from the bright sunshine. As the door closed, the light from the bar revealed a young-looking woman standing in the entryway. She was wearing a light gray dress with green trim, and her head was covered by a flowered bonnet. The flowers that adorned her hat appeared to have wilted, and she gave off an air of sadness as she stepped through the interior doorway of the main room. As she crossed the bar, the temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. Reaching the bar, she climbed on a stool a few feet down the counter from where Heath and James were silently exchanging looks of concern. It was rare to have a new face in the old establishment, and even rarer for that face to be a woman, especially a young, pretty belle like this visitor. The silence in the room was unbearable for a moment, before finally being broken when James remembered he was a bartender. "Welcome to Margaret's. What can I get you?" James tried to sound as friendly as he could, but a slight waver in his voice betrayed his unease. "I'll just have a water if that's all right. I've been traveling all day and I just need to rest for a few minutes." Her voice was much more ragged than either man expected, as though she had been screaming at the top of her lungs for hours and her vocal cords were about to give out. James grabbed a glass and walked over to the sink. As he returned with the water, the woman's eyes locked onto his. She had the deepest blue eyes he'd ever seen, almost like the sky itself was peering back at him. As he stared, her voice once again broke the silence. "I'm looking for a man who I'm told frequents this establishment. He can supposedly find anything, and I have something that I desperately need to find. Would you happen to know where I can find a man by the name of Heath Borjears?" At the sound of his name being mentioned, Heath perked up. He had been trying to avoid looking at the woman, preferring to mind his own business for the time being, hoping she would get her drink and be gone so he and James could pick back up on their discussion. Something about this woman unsettled Heath, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Hearing her mention his name just made the feeling worse. It wasn't that he didn't want to help her, it was more that he needed a short vacation after the last couple of jobs, and he now had the money to take one. He stared at his beer and pretended he hadn't heard her, hoping James would be able to get her to leave and maybe return another day after he had a chance to rest. He does come in here from time to time, but only in his off hours. He has an office downtown. You could leave a message with his assistant. James was trying to avoid looking at Heath, knowing that he preferred to keep business separate from drinking. "I was already at his office, and I explained my circumstances to Miss Samantha, but she refused to hear me out and said Mr. Borjears would not accept my case. I know if I could just speak to him, he seems like the kind of man who would be willing to help someone in my position." The woman was almost on the verge of tears, pleading with her eyes for any help James could give. In a moment of weakness, he glanced down the bar at Heath. Matching his gaze, the woman put together the most obvious clue that James could have provided and turned her attention to Heath. "Mr. Borjears, Heath Borjears, I've been looking for you for weeks. I desperately need your help to find my daughter." At the mention of a missing person, Heath raised his eyes to meet hers. He could see she was hurting, but this was way outside of his realm. A missing artifact? Sure. But a person? "Ma'am, I understand you must be in a lot of pain, but I can't help you. This sounds like something you need the proper authorities for. Have you gone to the police?" Somehow, he already knew the answer. "Police have been no use at all. They said she probably ran off with some boy, but that isn't something she would do. I've exhausted every possible option, spent months looking all over, and finally I heard about you. They say you can find anything, and that you have the nose for it. Please, you have to help me." Heath looked over at James, who was looking back with an apologetic smile. As he closed his eyes and took a deep breath, he heard the unexpected sound of James's voice. "We'll take the job."